the magic word. Here in the secret kindergarten, the world's best show for kids is starting. The Secret Kindergarten Radio Show. Use your ears and your imagination. We're going to play, we're having fun. The Magic Secret Kindergarten on the Revolution Radio Station.
Welcome back to the Secret Kindergarten. I'm your host, Gino. And I've got to keep talking about the fairies. I've got to. Have you ever wondered who makes the flowers grow? And how they came to be such pretty shapes and such pretty colours? Well, it's the fairies. True story. They make the flowers grow, and they spend a great deal of time trying to make them grow in the most beautiful colours and pretty shapes possible. It is very clever of them, isn't it? You and I couldn't do it. We don't know how. But then, God does not want us to do that. He wants us to do other sorts of work in the world. The fairies are very proud of their work, and they like it to be noticed and appreciated. When we admire a beautiful flower and feel glad because it is so pretty, the little fairy who made it is so pleased. But if you pick it roughly, and then you're careless about it and perhaps throw it away on a hot, dusty road, the little fairy's heart is hurt. She loved the flower and made it as well as ever she could. And she does not like to see all her work spoilt. Besides, the poor flower, although it cannot think like you and me and can only feel a very, very little, can feel enough to be a tiny little bit sad when it is not treated kindly. You see, the flower and the fairy who made it are some of the very little ones in God's world. We want to be very gentle with the wee ones, don't we? Some of the fairies help the insects to make their wonderful coats. They paint them all these glowing colours on their wings and backs. Hey, have you seen a glowworm before? We've got lots of glowworms down here in New Zealand, and they look like the starry sky. At night, of course. And the fairies paint these insects all glowing colours on their wings and backs, and I expect the butterfly is very pleased to have such a nice dress made for him by a dear little fairy, don't you? Then there are other sorts of fairies who live in the trees and wear green dresses, just the same colour as the trees. What do they look like? Well, something like us, only smaller and brighter and more beautifully dressed. Some of them are as small as a bird. The ones who make flowers. But the ones who live in the trees are larger, sometimes as big as 3 feet tall. They wear the most beautiful dresses, of all the most wonderful colours and so radiant. And they are very lively and light and love to dance all together in the sunbeams. They are very shy and generally run away when they see people coming. And they do not like to live near too many houses because so much noise frightens them. Sometimes, out in the woods, if you are very quiet and feel very happy, a little fairy will come near and have a good look at you. They can see us, although we do not often see them. You would like to see them? Perhaps you will one day. There are fairies who live in the streams and in the sea, and who play up and down the water and make it sparkle and run. The river fairies wear green dresses, like the tree fairies, but the most wonderful of all are the sea fairies. They love to ride on the top of the big waves and to splash up the white foam when the wave breaks. Some of them stay up in the air, among the clouds, and they have a great time making the sky look pretty. They weave the clouds into all sorts of funny and wonderful shapes, and they are very fond of making the clouds into the pattern we call mackerel sky. These fairies have such long, long hair, and when they fly in the wind, their long hair flies out behind them. Then there are funny little ones who live down in the earth, down in the mines, and right down under the earth. Their work is to help to make the useful and beautiful things we dig up out of the earth, iron and gold and silver and sparkling gems. Sometimes deep down in a mine, when all is still, men can hear them knocking and tapping. They are called the gnomes. And if you were to see one, you would see a funny little figure with a peaked cap and a long beard. Once, a friend of mine was lying down in the sun on a lonely moor in Scotland, when some of the little gnomes came creeping cautiously up to have a look at him. He had to be very quiet, because if he stirred, they ran back again and hid themselves behind the big stones and boulders on the moor. And another time, when he was sitting by a stream in a wood, he looked up and saw a lovely little flower fairy swinging on a stamen of a honeysuckle flower and watching him. You see, the fairies do a very great deal of work in the world. They make it useful and beautiful for us. So I think we ought to remember it and send them thanks in our thoughts. Don't you? We couldn't get along without them. And remember that even if you cannot catch sight of the fairies, you cannot help feeling the effects of their work all day long. It is the fairies who make the flowers grow and the winds blow, and they make the fire burn too. The fairies who make the fire burn are very gorgeous fairies. They wear golden red dresses, and when the fire burns merrily and roars up the chimney in winter, the fire fairies just love it and fly up the chimney with the flames. We couldn't live in the fire, could we? It would burn us all up if we tried to. But the fire fairies like it. They could not live anywhere else. So you see, the fire fairies make the fire burn, and the water fairies make the water sparkle, and the wind fairies make the breezes blow, and the flower fairies make the trees and flowers grow pretty. What would we do without them? Let us say hello to the roses as we go by, and to the little fairy who made them. I'm going to read you a story. And this story, well, it's not a story. It's a fable. So it's fable time. And this one's called The Honest Woodman. Once upon a time, out in the green, silent woods, near a rushing river that foamed and sparkled as it hurried along, there lived a poor poor woodcutter who worked hard to make a living for his family. Every day he would trudge into the forest with his strong, sharp axe over his shoulder. He always whistled happily as he went, because he was thinking that as long as he had his health and his axe, he could earn enough to buy all the bread his family needed. One day he was cutting a large oak tree near the riverside. The chips flew fast at every stroke, and the sound of the ringing axe echoed through the forest so clearly you might have thought a dozen wood choppers were at work that day. By and by, the woodman thought he would rest a while. He leaned his axe against the tree and turned to sit down. But he tripped over an old, gnarled root, and before he could catch it, his axe slid down the bank and into the river. The poor woodman gazed into the stream, trying to see the bottom. But it was far too deep there. The river flowed over the lost treasure just as merrily as before. "What will I do?" the woodman cried. "I've lost my axe. How will I feed my children now?" Just as he finished speaking, up from the lake rose a beautiful lady. She was the water fairy of the river, and came to the surface when she heard his sad voice. "What is your sorrow?" she asked kindly. The woodman told her about his trouble, and at once she sank beneath the surface and reappeared in a moment with an axe made of silver. "Is this the axe you lost?" she asked. The woodman thought of all the fine things he could buy for his children with that silver. But the axe was not his. So he shook his head and answered, "My axe was only made of steel." The water fairy laid the silver axe on the bank and sank into the river again. In a moment she rose and showed the woodman another axe. "Perhaps this one is yours?" she asked. The woodman looked. "Oh no," he replied. "This one is made of gold. It's worth many times more than mine." The water fairy laid the golden axe on the bank. Once again she sank. Up she rose. This time she held the missing axe. "That is mine," the woodman cried. "That is surely my old axe." "It is yours," said the water fairy. "And so are those other two now. They are gifts from the river because you have told the truth." And that evening, the woodman trudged home with all three axes on his shoulder, whistling happily as he thought of all the good things they would bring for his family. And now it's time for some music by Nancy Stewart of nancymusic.com. And this one's called Circle Round.
Circle round, circle fast and slow. Circle up, circle down, circle high and low. Circle round, circle fast and slow. Circle up, circle down, circle high and low. Circle high and low.
And this one's called Hibernating Animals.
The bears are hibernating. Oh yes, the bears are hibernating. bears are hibernating again. The snakes are hibernating. Oh yes, the snakes are hibernating. They're snuggled down in their dens with all of their friends, just waiting for the spring to come. Oh, the snakes are hibernating again. The bats are hibernating. Oh yes, the bats are hibernating. They're sleeping upside down, hanging around, just waiting for the spring to come. Oh, the bats are hibernating again. The frogs are hibernating. Oh yes, the frogs are hibernating. They're snuggled down in the ground where they don't make a sound, just waiting for the spring to come. Oh, the frogs are hibernating again. But when the spring comes with the warming sun, the animals start to move. They're in a hungry mood, they go looking for food. They're getting back in the groove, getting back in the groove, getting back in the groove. But now the bears are hibernating, and the snakes are hibernating. The bats are hanging around, sleeping upside down, just waiting for the spring to come. Oh, the frogs are hibernating again. Oh, the animals are hibernating again.
Oh, what happened? We were listening to hibernating animals. Oh, and I fell asleep. You know, did you know I'm a hibernating animal too? I just can't get away with sleeping for so long. But I'd sleep for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks on end. Sometimes if I could. This next song is called Pretty Baby, You're Surrounded in Love.
Mama's gonna rock you in her arms, in her arms, in her arms. Mama's gonna rock you in her arms. Pretty baby, you're surrounded in love. Daddy's gonna rock you in his arms, in his arms, in his arms. Daddy's gonna rock you in his arms. Pretty baby, you're surrounded in love. Grandma's gonna rock you in her arms, in her arms, in her arms. Grandpa's gonna rock you in his arms. Pretty baby, you're surrounded in love. Auntie's gonna rock you in her arms, in her arms, in her arms. Uncle's gonna rock you in his arms. Pretty baby, you're surrounded in love. Cousin's gonna rock you in their arms, in their arms, in their arms. Cousin's gonna rock you in their arms. Pretty baby, you're surrounded in love. Family's gonna rock you in its arms, in its arms, in its arms. Family's gonna rock you in its arms. Pretty baby, you're surrounded in love. Pretty baby, you're surrounded in love. Pretty baby, you're surrounded in love.
We are all surrounded in love. Sometimes it's hard to notice that. But it's true. I'm going to play you a story so I can have a sip of tea. And this is a really good one. We've played it before, and this one's called Which Was the King? And it's got a clever little boy in this one. So let's check it out again.
Which Was the King? By James Baldwin. One day, King Henry IV of France was hunting in a large forest. Towards evening, he told his men to ride home by the main road, while he went another way that was somewhat longer. As he came out of the forest, he saw a little boy by the roadside, who seemed to be watching for someone. "Well, my boy," said the king, "are you looking for your father?" "No, sir," answered the boy. "I'm looking for the king. They say he is hunting in the woods, and perhaps will ride out this way. So I'm waiting to see him." "Oh, if that's what you wish," said King Henry, "get up behind me on the horse, and I'll take you to the place where you will see him." The boy got up at once, and sat behind the king. The horse cantered briskly along, and the king and the boy were soon quite well acquainted. "They say that King Henry always has a number of men with him," said the boy. "How shall I know which is he?" "Oh, that will be easy enough," was the answer. "All the other men will take off their hats, but the king will keep his on." "Do you mean that the one with his hat on will be the king?" "Certainly." Soon they came into the main road, where a number of the king's men were waiting. All the men seemed amused when they saw the boy, and as they rode up, they greeted the king by taking off their hats. "Well, my boy," said King Henry, "which do you think is the king?" "I don't know," answered the boy, "but it must be either you or I, for we both have our hats on."
We both have our hats on. It must be you or I. Now, what do you reckon? Do you think the kid was being cheeky? No, he was not being cheeky. He was just being honest. Because you kids out there are honest and you tell the truth. And you know what? Sometimes, I'm just going to be honest, sometimes things don't turn out like the honest woodman. The honest woodman, he told the truth and he got gold and silver. Sometimes you tell the truth and no one believes you. But that's okay, because the fairies believe you. The fairies know when you're lying and when you're telling the truth. And you can still get a reward from the river, a reward from the garden, a reward from nature. It just might not be gold or silver. So you always have the fairies as a friend. If no one else believes you, the fairies do. And I have an activity idea that you can do at home with your mummy or your daddy, or your mummy and your daddy, or your uncle or your auntie, or your brother or your sister, or everybody. So everybody, shush, sit down, get a pen and paper, hurry up, because I told you so. Because we're going to make some incomplete lines. Do you know what incomplete is? Incomplete is when you haven't finished. So someone can make a line, an interesting line, a wiggly line, a curvy line, a jagged line on a piece of drawing paper. And then you say that is an incomplete drawing, so you have to finish it. Someone else has to finish it. So mum or dad, you can start this activity with an interesting line. And then you pass the paper over to the other person and they can finish the drawing. They turn that line into some art, into a picture, into an object, into whatever. And we see what we get at the end. You might have an amazing piece of artwork at the end of it. And that is the end of another half hour of the Secret Kindergarten. I love you. Bye.